Hi there everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is M the Eng. Tomorrow is Bell Let's Talk Day, January 30th, 2019. So I figured today I would try something a little bit different and let's talk. So Bell Let's Talk Day is it's a yearly event that Bell does where they donate 5 cents per every applicable text, tweet, I believe. I think it extends to all of their social media, phone call, etc., to mental health initiatives in Canada on this one day. So this year it's going to be tomorrow. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll post this video today, maybe tomorrow. Either way, it's on January 30th. So in light of that, I figured I would try something a little bit different today, and I would talk about my much hinted at mental health experience. So something that I have found a lot of on YouTube is that a lot of people, I watch a lot of Markiplier's videos, I watch a lot of Jacksepticeye's videos, I watch a little bit of PewDiePie, I watch some of, I can't remember her name now, Liza something, Superwoman, etc. Like, I have lots of videos lots of people that I follow on YouTube, and I find that a lot of people go to them, like, if they have the opportunity to ask questions, or if they have an opportunity to see them, or just talk to them, like, say, super chats on live streams, that kind of thing. A lot of people ask about, how do you deal with anxiety? Or a lot of people will ask, have you ever had depression or have any issues with mental health? A lot of people will say things like, you've helped me through dark times, you've helped so-and-so, if not themselves, then you've helped someone that they know through incredibly difficult periods in their lives. And what I have found is that a lot of people don't exactly have a lot of experience with mental health themselves, which is fortunate. Like, it's no weakness of theirs, obviously, but a lot of people go to them looking for these pieces of advice, and in some instances they may not be able to get any advice because that person hasn't experienced it. So I have, and I guess maybe now is a good time to talk about it. So I guess my mental health journey probably started back, well, I imagine it started when I was really young. There's no real indication when it would have started. All I know is that I definitely remember the first time feeling like what I would now refer to as depressed. I don't know why I put that in quotes, because I was depressed, I guess. I just didn't have what I would now refer to as chronic depression until later. But the first time I think I experienced a depressive episode would have been when I was like 12, I think. My family and I were living in Alberta at the time, and I'm from, well, I was born in Newfoundland, but I grew up in Nova Scotia. All of my family is in the Maritimes in Canada, and so being in Alberta, we were separated from our family for quite a while and that kind of thing, and we were just going through some pretty rough periods. Maybe that's a tale for another day, but that period of my life would be the first time that I really remember feeling what I would consider depressed. So anyway, that sort of came and went. Like, it wasn't anything chronic. It didn't last very long. It was just kind of like, I would say, depressive episodes. And as a preteen, like, I was 12, so that's not unusual. So I didn't think anything of it. My family didn't think anything of it. Life goes on. So the first time that I can really say, yes, this is when problems started, was when I was 14. I was in middle school at the time. Middle school is always hard. I don't care who you are. Middle school is just a difficult period of time. And I won't get into a lot of the details there, but there were some people in my life that had what they knew at the time were mental health issues and that kind of thing. So the idea was there that, like, oh, this is a real thing. We started learning about it in, like, our health education classes and that kind of thing. And I was starting to, like, amidst those same times, I was starting to feel like, oh, maybe I can relate to this. Maybe this explains how I'm feeling. But then at the same time, I was going through those angsty periods of, like, 14-year-old, nobody understands me and stuff. Not to make fun of anybody who's going through that period. I promise it gets better. But, looking back on myself, I was like, nobody understands me. Nobody gets me. No one will ever know the pain that I'm experiencing. and, kind of ridiculous stuff like that. So anyway, that would definitely be the first time, though, that I can say I was feeling depressed. I felt like very overwhelmed. I was an absolute perfectionist at the time. I felt that I needed to, excuse me, be perfect all the time, behave perfectly all the time. But at the same time, like, I was trying to balance what my parents wanted for me and what I knew would make my parents happy and my parents proud, and trying to balance what I knew my peers would find not necessarily attractive per se, but, would make me cool or would make me a valuable person to be in a friends group. Because at this point, my parents or my family and I had just moved back from Alberta. So again, I was sort of like displaced, didn't have a whole lot of friends. I eventually did fall into, I don't want to say a friend group, but I had one really close friend. But, it was a really tumultuous point in time for me. So I struggled a lot with like identity, like who am I? I went through a really like emo phase. The music I still love. I just don't dress like it anymore. So that was sort of like that period in time. And then by the time I got to high school, things really started to break down a bit. Like, I wasn't as like outwardly angsty anymore, but I was internally very unhappy. At this point, I had sort of, I don't know if there was a moment that sort of was like, nope, you're not allowed to feel anger anymore. But I know that I definitely did shy away from that emotion a lot. Like, I guess I imagine it had something to do with, you see people and they're very, very overly dramatic, overly emotional, and oftentimes it makes people uncomfortable. I'm not here to say whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but, there are those people that are, really seeking attention for whatever reason. I'm not here to say that that's a good thing or a bad thing either. It just is. But there are people that are really seeking attention, and they really go out to be as emotional and as dramatic as possible. And I found that very unnerving, and I found it very, in my, 15-year-old self's mind, I thought it was really rude. Like, it was a really awful thing to do to people, make people feel uncomfortable just because you're having an emotional breakdown or whatever. I don't feel that way anymore. But at that point in time in my life, I thought that emotions were very unattractive. I thought that they were very, they were weak. I had all of those really negative, stigmatizing sort of inner dialogues. So I just cut off emotion for the most part. Like, I would allow myself to be happy and that kind of thing. Anything that was attractive and good and wasn't awkward or uncomfortable for anyone. But I would never, under any circumstances, allow myself to be angry or allow anyone to think that I was anything but happy. Sorry. So that culminated later on in life to be a pretty big problem. But at the time, I guess I just, rather than feel all the things I was trying to feel, like feel angry about things, whether or not they were justified doesn't matter. Like, you have to go through those periods where you just feel things. And I didn't allow myself to do those things. I didn't allow myself to feel angry. I didn't allow myself to feel sad. Even though I did. I was very angry and I was very sad, but I never really talked about it or allowed it to be expressed or any of those things. My parents might disagree. I don't know. Maybe I was an angry little person at the time. But from my perspective, that's kind of what happened. So I guess in high school, I was in a long-term relationship with someone who turned out to be very unhealthy for me. And that didn't help. Like, that I just had one more thing to be contending with on top of my own perfectionist desires, I guess. And, I had this relationship and, trying to balance friendships and trying to figure out what I was going to do in university and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And it's just a hard point in time in your life. But I never did anything about it. Like, I never really chalked it up to, this is a mental illness or anything like that. And mental illness wasn't something that we really talked about a whole lot, in high school. Like, in middle school, you kind of get the rundown, like, oh, these exist, like depression and anxiety and blah, 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 those exist. And then in high school, it's kind of like, they still exist, but you're not allowed to, like, only the people who really are looking for attention ever claim to have those things. So again, I kind of shied away from that sort of label and that kind of thing because again, it was unattractive and it was an immature thing to do, to be, or whatever. And I've always been a mind over matter type of person. So me thinking that I had any of these things, well, it's just mind over matter. Like, just figure it out. You'll be fine. You're a smart person. You're very intelligent. Like, mind over matter. Your mind is powerful, so mind over matter. And then in university, I was dating somebody else by the time I reached university. And I went into engineering straight from high school. That's sort of a lie. I did an extra year of high school after I graduated because I didn't know what I wanted. As I said before, I thought I was going to do musical theater for my life, and I kind of wish I had. But anyway, that's beside the point. I took an extra year to figure out what I wanted. I took like my grade 12 physics and grade 12 chemistry and all of the classes that I had the classes to graduate. I graduated with honors with distinction, I think. But, I didn't take like all these science classes because I didn't think I was going to need them. So anyway, I went back for grade 13 and did all those things. And then when I got to university, I went straight into engineering, and engineering's hard. I know everybody is probably super sick of hearing that, but it is. It's very hard. My first year was 5 classes each term, and they weren't like 5 classes. They were 5 classes plus, I think 3 of them had 3-hour lab components plus tutorial components. One of my classes had 3 assignments every week, and they were big assignments. It was hard. Like, it just is what it is. So I, there's a lot of stress associated with that. There was also a lot of stress with adjusting to not living at home with my parents anymore, trying to make new friends again. Find a social circle that you belong in, I suppose, or feel like you belong in. I also started my first semester in one of the loudest, sketchiest residences that the university had to offer. So as soon as I was able, I got out of there. But all of these things were contributing to sort of like a downward cycle of depression. Again, I didn't recognize it as depression at the time. I didn't know that was a thing that I had. So they were contributing to this thing that I didn't know existed, and this little ball of like anger and sadness and stress and frustration was just building up, and I wasn't allowing myself to feel it. So it kind of just built and built until in second year, when we started taking 6 courses each semester, which would carry on right until the final year. In engineering, as I took it, you take 5 courses each semester your first year, and then 6 courses each semester after that, up until your final year, your 4th or 5th, depending on if you do co-op. And that's just the way that it is. So once second year rolled around, I was noticeably, at least to myself, I'm sure other people saw it long before I did, but I was definitely able to see that I was very, very unhappy, very unmotivated, sleeping a lot, really, really listless. Like, I wasn't happy about anything. Like, I wasn't excited to go hang out with my friends. I had no desire to do any of the things that I liked, like play games. I had no desire to go see anyone. I had no desire to go for walks. I had no desire to do anything. And I would just spend a lot of nights just crying, and I didn't know why. And I couldn't figure it out. Like, what's wrong with me? I'm doing fine in my classes. Like, I have really, really awesome friends. But I had just like no desire, no happiness, no joy, no nothing. I was just kind of dead. Like, that's kind of how it felt. And the only thing that was there was this like deep aching yawn of emptiness. And that sounds kind of poetic, but that's the only way that I could figure out how to explain it. It was just like this gaping hole that sort of felt like a vacuum, like it needed something to be there. It needed something to fill it, but there was nothing to pull, like there was nothing there to pull in, and it just felt empty, I guess. So, at that point in time, I, again, still didn't realize that I had any major issue, but I went to see a counselor at the University Health Center, and that made loads of difference. Helped a lot. I would leave those counseling sessions feeling like $1,000,000, just because like I knew all of the things that I had to do to make myself feel better, and I knew exactly what to say to the counselor to make them feel like I was okay. And for me, wanting to make everybody else happy in life, sorry, that's where I used to derive a lot of joy, is like making everybody else happy, making everybody else proud of me. I wasn't saying those things to lie or to get away with, oh, well, I feel things, but I'm not going to tell you, kind of thing. I thought I was being honest. And I just wanted to make this person proud of me for whatever reason. I don't know why. But, so anyway, when I was doing the counseling at that point in time, it helped a lot. We did what's referred to as CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is pretty common, as far as I'm aware, for, like short-term kind of counseling sessions, as opposed to longer-term psychiatry or psychology. So CBT in its basic form is, as far as I understand it, is that your actions contribute to how you feel, contribute to what you think, contribute to your actions. So it's a cycle, and if you change one of those parts of the cycle, you can change the rest of the cycle. So let's say if you're spending a lot of time by yourself in your room, and that's your action, and it's making you feel sad and lonely, and then you think that, no, I just spend a lot of time by myself. I don't feel like I want to hang out with people. I'm going to go hang out by myself. So you tend to contribute to this cycle. If you decide that, no, maybe I'm not going to spend time by myself in my room today, I'm going to go hang out with friends, or, go do something else, then maybe that'll change how you feel, and maybe that'll change how you think, which will then turn back into changing your actions. So that's what we worked on. That was CBT. And I found that it worked for me when I was in, like, say, crisis moments, that kind of thing. That was very helpful, and I had really, really good friends to help me along the way. And then when I was in my third year of engineering, I decided to do the co-op stream. So at the beginning of second year, I had actually... No, sorry, that's a lie. At the beginning of my third year, I had my first co-op. It went really well. I did find that I was experiencing a lot of depressive symptoms and that kind of thing at the time. Again, I would never have called it that. But I got back to school. Things were great. I was back with my friends. I still had this long-term boyfriend of mine. And then the second co-op rolled around. So when I was on my first co-op, my co-op advisor told me that the only thing that was going to stop me was confidence. Like, I had all of the skills, I had the intelligence, I was able to work with people, blah, blah, blah. But the only thing that was going to stop me was my self-confidence. And he's like, if you want to take my advice, I would recommend doing an away co-op. You'll have an opportunity to see how you are elsewhere. It'll be a really good experience. You'll get to see if working away is something that you like. And you'll get to see what other parts of the country or other parts of the world, depending on where you choose to go, what their practices are and how that goes. So I was like, okay, yeah, that's a great idea. Took that to heart. So when the third co-op rolled around, I applied for a job out in Saskatchewan and got the job. Was very excited. The pay rate was ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And it was a really sought after job. So I was like, yeah, go me. Bomb. I'm fantastic. I got this awesome job. And then I went to Saskatchewan. My long-term boyfriend proposed just before I left. Everything was great, fine and dandy, went out. And I was in this teeny tiny town of 2,200 people, and the girls that I was living with at the time, the roommates that work had set me up with, lived in the area, or not far, and they would go home on the weekends, and so I spent a lot of time alone, which is great. And I didn't have a car. You never need one in Nova Scotia, like, the bus systems are usually really great, blah, blah, blah. But in Saskatchewan, everyone has a car because the way that cities and towns and stuff are set up is very different. Like, you can't walk places. There's no reliable bus routes. You drive or you don't go anywhere. So everybody that was there had their own vehicles and stuff like that. And so I just spent a lot of time alone, which was fine. I like to read books. I like to play games. It was fine. But eventually it started to wear me down, just being alone all the time. And I spent a lot of time thinking and that kind of thing. I also spent a lot of time working out. I spent a lot of time not exactly partying, but we would have like dinners together, like all of the co-op students together, who lived on the street. We would have dinners together and that kind of thing. We would go places and go out for food and blah blah blah. So it's like I did have a pretty good social life, except on the weekends, when my roommates would leave, etc. And over time, I found that my fiance was growing more and more distant. Like, he didn't want to talk on the phone. He didn't want to, like, he didn't want to Skype. He didn't text me very much and all that kind of thing. So I kind of just chalked it up to, like, okay, it's the distance. Like, maybe he's got stuff he's working through too. Like, you know, that's fair. We had been together for almost 4 years at the time, coming up on 4 years. And so, you know, I trusted him. Like, I didn't think that, you know, anything detrimental was going on. So I was battling, you know, what I now know is depression. And I did have a bit of anxiety. It got worse over time. But at that point, you know, I was dealing with this depression and also with being away from my family and being away from my fiance and my friends and spending a lot of time alone. And then he broke up with me. So, and this isn't to blame this individual sort of story. This is what happened. So I was out in Saskatchewan by myself, and suddenly I was no longer engaged. And, you know, I went through the 5 stages of grief, and the first stage is denial. So I was like, oh no, it's okay. Like, I'll get back to Nova Scotia and things will go back to normal. It'll be fine. And then I got angry. And then I went into bargaining. And then comes the depression stage. So the depression stage for someone who's already depressed is really hard. So I was suicidal. I just spent all of my time like crying or wishing I was alone so I could cry. I stopped working out. I stopped, well, I don't know if I stopped eating, but I stopped caring about what I ate. So, you know, before that I had been working out almost every day. I had been eating really, really well, hanging out with people, blah, blah, blah. And then I stopped doing all of those things. And the depression got worse and worse and worse. And eventually one of my coworkers who lived on the street with me, he was another co-op student, he knew something was up and he came over to see me unexpectedly one day. And I was just on the couch crying. Like, my eyes are all puffy and gross and whatever. And he was supposed to go golfing with a friend. And he said, I think we should go to the hospital. And I was like, oh, geez. This was when I was still very afraid of hospitals and doctors and stuff when it came to mental health. Like, they're gonna put me in the straitjacket in a padded room and never let me go. That's not a thing. Unless for a depressed person, that's not a thing. I don't think that that's something that happens all that commonly. It didn't happen to me. So I was like, I don't know if I want to go. And he was like, okay, well, you think about it and let me know, and I can cancel my golf plans. So eventually we did end up going. He was a really, really invaluable person to have with me at that point in time. It's like we walked across the little town to the hospital, and like, he knew the drill. He'd been through something similar. And I got some medication to help with like anxiety, panic attacks, like for when I was so overwhelmed with emotion that I couldn't do anything else. I could just take one of those. And yeah, and I got a few other like long-term medications. I got a sleeping pill, that kind of thing, which now that in retrospect was kind of risky because I didn't have a doctor there to sort of keep an eye on me, and that's not usually something they want to do if they can't keep an eye on you, because medications can be, they can have side effects and that kind of thing. But I guess the way that it worked out is like I was in such a state that they figured that that was a better option than leaving me as I was. So anyway, all that aside, my work term in Saskatchewan came to an end. I came back to Nova Scotia. I decided that I wasn't going to be an engineer anymore and I was going to go do massage therapy. So I dropped out of engineering school and I went to a community college, or not a community college, professional college? I can't even remember what they're called. But I went to a college that was specifically for massage therapy. And I started doing that, and things were not getting better. I lived with my sister once I returned to Nova Scotia, and I missed a lot of school. I would sleep all the time. I would cry all the time. And there were a few times where I would just walk to the hospital. The first time, my really good friends, Brett and Keegan, um, they walked to my school and they went and got me, and we went to the hospital and they walked me to the hospital to make sure I went, and blah blah blah. And the doctors were playing with medications, etc., etc. But because I was no longer part of the bigger university, I didn't have access to the counseling services that I had had before, and I didn't have access to like the clinics on site anymore. So I was, I kind of had to work with walk-in clinics and that kind of thing. So that was not ideal, but it was what it was. So, yeah, so I would spend a lot of time crying and sleeping and walking to the hospital and that kind of thing. And I went back to the hospital over and over and over again, and they kept saying, your medication needs to be fixed. It's not at the right level. You need to see a doctor that can sort of keep an eye on you. But I didn't have a family doctor, so I had to go to a bunch of walk-ins, and it was a very long process. Eventually things sort of came to a head when I was like, I can't do this anymore. I was just crying, and I felt dead already. Like, that was the way that I described it. I just felt dead anyway. Inside I was empty, and that vacuum was still there, and there was just this, I was so tired. Like, all the sleep in the world couldn't have made me feel better. I just wanted to go to sleep and stay asleep for years, centuries, forever. It's not that I wanted to die, it's just that I didn't want to live anymore, which are very, very different, actually. So I don't think anybody really wants to go through that, like, yes, I want life to be completely over and that's it, like, I want to die. I don't know if anybody really goes through that. I think people mainly go through, I can't deal with this anymore, I don't know how to get out, I want this to stop. I think that's primarily, maybe I'm wrong, but that is what I've been told and what I experienced. So, anyway, I reached that point, and I was just crying and freaking out, and anyway, so I was going to go back to the hospital, and Keegan drove me to the hospital. Me and my sister, we went to the hospital together that time, and they were like, okay, clearly we need to expedite the process to get you in to see somebody, like a psychologist. So they did, and they had, like, I think I had a next day, like, crisis appointment at, like, the addiction center. I don't know how that works. Like, I don't know, maybe that's just where they do their, like, really short-term crisis appointments or whatever, because I wasn't dealing with addictions or anything, but that's where they sent me. So I had an appointment there. They sort of gave me more coping mechanisms, gave me a number to call, a couple of different numbers to call, etc. And eventually they got me in with a social worker, I think she was, like, through the community. So that helped a lot. Eventually my medication got fixed. They just had to deal with the levels and that kind of thing. I was fortunate that the first medication that they gave me worked out. It doesn't always work out that way. In fact, that's pretty uncommon that the first medication that they give you for something like depression is the one that will work, or is one of the ones that will work. But in my case it was. They just had to increase the dose, and that was fine. Eventually I reached a point where I was feeling better and decided to go back to university, go back to engineering, and I did. I was in school again in my second to final year of engineering, and the readjustment period was really, really hard. I went through a ton of anxiety, and I was really, really struggling with trying to get back into the swing of things and feeling like I'd forgotten things and that everybody else was doing better than I was because I had been gone for a year, and, maybe I'm not so smart after all, maybe I can't do it. And eventually I went back to the hospital because I was just really, really struggling again, just having such a hard time. And I actually got a requisition to see a psychiatrist, a resident psychiatrist, at one of the main hospitals. And so I saw this psychiatrist for, I believe, 8 months, and we actually did stuff other than CBT, which was extremely valuable. We did what's called psychotherapy, and that's not to say that I have any, like, when I say the word psycho, I find that people often think, like, hallucinations and hearing voices and that kind of thing. And while that's also part of the same sort of, I guess, like, you could use the same sort of techniques on that, it doesn't encompass the whole thing. So I don't have any sort of, I don't hear voices, I don't see hallucinations, I don't have any of those sort of like delusions or anything like that, although those are very real. I just had a lot of like deep-seated, I don't know, just emotional issues, I guess. I can't say like they stem from my childhood. Well, some of them did, I imagine. But like it was just a lot of things. And like me not allowing myself to feel anything, really was really problematic because I couldn't identify emotions anymore. I would be feeling something and it would just be upsetting because I didn't know what it was. I didn't know where it was coming from. I didn't know how to deal with it. So we worked on a lot of that. Like, okay, how do you feel about this? Well, I don't know. Well, if you had to decide, like if you had to tell me what emotions you were feeling, are you mad? Are you sad? Are you happy? Does it make you uncomfortable? Are you nervous? So we reached a point where I was able to start identifying emotions. And then I got used to the fact that you can feel more than one emotion at the same time. So you can have like bittersweet feelings. You can have mixed emotions. You can be happy and nervous about something at the same time. You can feel angry and also feel guilty. Like those are absolute possibilities, and this is brand new information for me. So I saw this psychiatrist for probably 8 months, and it helped so much. Like, I was able to finally put away a lot of old baggage that I had been carrying around from this dead relationship, from my previous relationship back in high school, the one that was really not so good for me, from a lot of other things that I thought that I had dealt with that, talking to this person about suddenly made me like cry. And, I never thought that, I was still carrying all that weight around. But it took a trained person to really help me pull that out and, face it, deal with it, and then, set it aside, put it on a shelf where, it can get some air, but I don't need to think about it all the time, rather than stuffing it in a box where it's just waiting to explode out. So after all of that, like my sessions with this person finally did come to an end, and that was really bittersweet. Like, I was really, really proud of myself for how much work I had done and how much I had accomplished during those 8 months. But, like, I don't want to say that I liked him per se, because I didn't know him. Like, I don't know that person at all. I knew that he was my counselor, and he knows a lot about me, but, that's not the relationship you have with a counselor or with a therapist or anything like that. Like, you don't know much about them, which makes it a really, really safe space to just be like, I don't need to care what you think about me. And realistically, they don't think anything about you. You're patient. They care about you in the sense that, they worry about you, they want you to do well, but they don't have any judgments about you, they don't have any real feelings about you or anything like that. It just, they care for you, and that's it. So it makes it a very safe space to just be like, I have all of these things that inside me that scare me, or that make me angry, or that I wish weren't there, or anything like that, and you can just spit them out, and then it's like, whoa, I don't have to carry that anymore. It doesn't have to be mine. It can just exist in the world, in the ether, and it doesn't matter, because nobody else knows about it, except for this one person who's, legally required to never say anything. So it's fine. It's fine. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent, but after all of that, like, I still have, rough days. I still have days like today where I don't want to get out of bed and I don't want to go to class, and I just feel down. I feel kind of like lonely, maybe a little empty, but I know that tomorrow in all likelihood will be better, and I can identify those emotions now. Did you see that? How I feel lonely and empty and a little sad, maybe a little unmotivated, instead of just feeling this wave of emotional confusion that I can't identify and I can't deal with, and I don't know what it is, and try to stuff it back in this little box, and it doesn't fit, so it spills out. Yeah, I don't have to deal with that stuff anymore. So life is better now. Like, it's never going to be perfect, and I do now have a diagnosis for generalized anxiety disorder. Do I have a diagnosis for depression? Can't remember. I think the person that gave me the anxiety diagnosis was reluctant to give me the depression diagnosis because he felt that it was still related to the breakup with my ex-fiance now. And I can't agree. but I'm being treated with medication that treats both anxiety and depression, and it works wonderfully for me. I haven't had to change my dose or anything like that in quite a long time, and most days I feel great. There are days where I burn myself out, and then, the days afterwards are maybe not so great, but most days I feel great. And that's something that I never ever thought was going to be possible again after going through the period that I did 4 years ago. 2015 was the year that everything came crashing down, and I was going to the hospital regularly and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, so I guess that's my story. And that was long and rambling and probably didn't make a ton of sense, but I guess the big takeaways from that are that get help. Like, if you're feeling whatever, like, there's never going to be, I shouldn't say never, there should never be a counselor that says, oh, you're fine. I don't think that what you're feeling is legitimate. I think that you're just making it up, or I think that whatever. There should never be a case where that happens, and if it ever happens to you, report that person and go see someone else, because that's not a thing. That should never ever be a thing. I believe that that's probably against I don't know if there's rules per se. I know that in medicine and that kind of thing there's a do no harm tenet, and that in my mind goes directly against that. So anyway, if you're feeling these things, get help. Like, seek help. There's usually lots and lots of resources. I can only speak for Canada. I don't know what it's like in the States where you guys don't have universal health care. I'm very fortunate that we do, because if I had to pay out of pocket for all of these things, I would not be doing better now. So if you're in Canada, there's tons and tons of free resources for you. Hopefully other parts of the world have the same thing. I know in Canada there's I believe there's crisis text line here. There's also phone lines. I know in Halifax there's the mobile crisis center, something like that. I'll put links and numbers and stuff in the description, just so you guys can figure it out. Rather than relying on the strange words that come out of my mouth and sometimes make sense, but most of the time don't. Rather than relying on those, you can just look it up. There's those. You can always walk into an emergency center, like the emergency department at any hospital. You can walk in and say, I'm feeling suicidal, or whatever, and they'll take you in. They'll at least talk to you. They may or may not admit you. There was a point in time where I wish that they would have admitted me, but I wasn't, because I had the resources and the support system at home, it wasn't required. So don't panic. Being admitted is not the end of the world. It's probably a good thing. But they're not gonna lock you up and throw away the key or anything like that. They're gonna get you help. They want you to be a part of a functional part of society. They don't want to take you away from society and be like, no, this person's dangerous. No, they want to basically rehab you and get you back to functioning and being happy again. That's what they want. And like, they're real people. They're not just an institution. Like, going and talking to the doctors and nurses was often some of the most validating points during like my depression period. Like, because they understood, and they would say, I want to help you. I want to help you so badly. And in some cases they could. In some cases they were able to change my medication or get me in, or expedite the process to get me to see somebody. Or in some cases they couldn't. They were like, I'm not authorized to change your medication or anything like that, but if you ever need anything, come back. Please come back. We will try to help you. And just having someone to talk to was huge. So if you don't have a close friend or something that you can talk to, crisis text line exists. The mobile calling centers exist. You can always, like, if you want to talk to a real person, go to the hospital. You might have to wait a bit, but you can talk to a nurse. You can talk to a doctor. They can put a plan in place for you. One thing that I found is that when I went the first time, it didn't seem like anything was going to happen right away. When I went to the emergency department, it didn't seem like anything was going to happen right away. So I went back and I went back and I went back. Like, I didn't let it lie, which was incredibly difficult at the time, but was also incredibly valuable. Because if I had left and, not worried about it, or, whatever, maybe nothing would have happened. And I know, like, I didn't have a lot of fight left in me at that point, so I was lucky that other people were willing to push me to fight. So if I can be that person to push you to fight, like if you're exhausted and things aren't working, please keep trying. Please keep trying. Something will eventually work out. It may take a while. It may take fighting, but it will. It will work out, I promise. And things do get better. Like I said, I was dead already. I don't know if it could have gotten a whole lot worse. But here I am. I'm better. Better. Not perfect, but better. And most days, like I said, are great. Like, I can have happy days. I can, take my dog for a wonderful walk. Oh, he's scratching in the background. Speak of the devil. So, yeah, I don't know. And medication is not the devil. Like, people are very worried about taking medication for things. It's very helpful. Like, depression and often anxiety. There are chemical imbalances in the brain. Oh, hi, Duke. Duke-a-doo. He also helps. But yeah, like chemical imbalances in the brain. So, if you're diabetic, you take your insulin. There are things that you can do to help. Exercise releases endorphins. I can firmly support the fact that cuddling puppies and kittens is very helpful. But when I was in Saskatchewan and I was really experiencing like one of the worst periods in my life, I was doing all of those things. Well, I didn't have puppies and kittens, but I was exercising and eating well, and I was spending time with people, blah blah blah. So sometimes that's not going to work. It's not going to fix everything. So just be open to the fact that maybe medication will help you. And I don't plan to be on my medication for the rest of my life. I'm going to get off of it at some point. But right now, where I'm in and out of school and, going to be looking for work and through a lot of transitions, it's a good strategy for me right now to stay on the medication until something balances out, until, I'm no longer transitioning all the time and something is more regular. So then I can work with a doctor at that point in time when I want to get off of it. So that's just me rambling. I needed to tell that story. And it seemed like a good time to do it, with Bell Let's Talk Day being tomorrow. Also, my PMA hat. If you guys don't know what PMA is, go watch some Jacksepticeye. He's funny and hilarious and amazing. And swears a lot, so children beware. I just say that because I feel like I have to. But yeah, so, I don't know. I really want to say, like, I have this email address, email me if you ever need to talk, but I'm not a good person to do that. I'm not educated enough to take care of someone else. I really struggle to take care of myself a lot of the time. I still haven't eaten and it's almost 3:00. So, and that happens regularly. So yeah, but there are resources out there and people that are equipped to help, people that are equipped to bear your burdens with you. So I'll put some resources down in the description. Hopefully that'll help someone. So anyway, thanks so much for watching and sticking through this rambly story with me. Appreciate you being here. If you have any thoughts or comments or anything like that, let me know. I do respond to my comments. And you can also find me on Twitter at mtheeng. So you can also tweet at me. I'm on there frequently. But anyway, yeah, if you need to talk or whatever, you can reach out to me. I do answer my comments and my tweets. But again, I'm not educated. I'm training to be an engineer. I'm not a psychiatrist. I have lots of experience and I can speak anecdotally, but I can't solve everybody's problems. So, but anyway, I hope that helped you, friends. And please, I do say that sincerely. I do consider you guys to be my friends, whether I've spoken to lots of you, but whether I've spoken to you or not, I do consider you to be a friend. So take that for what it's worth. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.